Right, I think we're ready to begin.
There we go. I think everybody knows my name's Doug Manley. I need to explain my role a little bit this evening. They have my nameplate up here as judge. I'm not actually here as judge this evening. And I've been called various titles. We're trying to figure out what to call me. I'm not exactly a hearing officer either, in the sense that I'm not going to be making any decisions or even recommending any course of action tonight. It's called a parliamentarian, but that doesn't sound exactly right either. My role basically is to conduct this part of the meeting, to try to keep matters fair, orderly, on track. Our break here was for me to talk to the two attorneys involved to make sure we all agreed on the ground rules. We're in what we're calling an administrative hearing, so it is not a trial. It is open to the members of the public observing. However, it's not a public meeting in the sense that the public can't get up and speak like they would at citizens' comments at a regular city council meeting. So they're welcome to observe, but not to have any input here. The members of council may or may not choose to take any sort of action on a motion at the conclusion of the meeting, and we'd ask that people not start expressing opinions one way or the other out in the audience, and might have to ask you to step outside. As an administrative hearing, the Colorado rules of evidence do not strictly apply, but there are certain basic rules of fairness that apply to any type of hearing. That includes giving notice of what the accusations are, notice of the evidence, an opportunity to have an attorney, and to present relevant evidence by the persons being accused. I think that has all been done here. We're here based on certain accusations made against Councilmember Vela. The City Council directed some months ago to hire an outside investigator to do that at city expense and to present a report. The executive summary of that report has been received. At the last council meeting, a citation was issued to come and respond to those matters this evening. Representing the city is Mr. Maloff. Representing Mr. Vela is Attorney Mr. Horton. After all the relevant information has been presented, I'll turn the meeting back over to the mayor, and we'll see if there are motions, if any. If there are, we have to council to decide what action to take. Our proposal here is to first of all present the results of the investigation. As I came in, there were copies available. I don't know if there still are or not, but there were copies available out on the table as I came in this evening. Present information on behalf of the city's position. That would be through Mr. Mello. Information on behalf of Mr. Vela's position through his attorney, Mr. Horton. I'm told that the parties are not anticipating necessarily having witnesses speak, but rather to present their information. And once that's concluded, then we'll see what action, if any, council wants to take. So I think our starting point then is Mr. Mello.
Dean, real quick. If you're looking for the agenda, it's on the council packet, on the back of the council packet, not on anything else. So if you want to follow along where we're at, it's on the back of your council packet.
To some extent, but we, by stipulation, have agreed to modify it a little bit. And Mr. Manley, or Judge Manley, knows about that. We've kind of worked through a little bit because of how things are going to play out. You'll see the differences, but for the most part, the agenda still stands. Okay, I appreciate certainly that there's so much interest out there in the audience, and from the city's perspective, we view this as a very serious matter. We view this as a matter that is of public concern, as demonstrated by, I count 1, 2, 3, 4 different reporting agencies that are here. The council considers it as a serious matter. Mr. Vela considers it a serious matter. So to reinforce what Judge Manley has said, we would appreciate it. Silence is golden in this case. It's not a trial. It's a hearing. The council is going to be asked to judge what they hear and try to put it into perspective. But with respect to all of the participants, I'm going to ask you to please not emote your emotions with regard to how you feel, either pro or con, about some of the things that you're going to hear. One of the things that's very important here is we're going to focus on a singular event that occurred in this room or in a room adjacent to this room. So whatever other baggage is brought into this conversation, it will be quickly and methodically thrown out. So we're not going to talk about who shot John in 1993. We're not going to be concerned about hard feelings that may or may not exist because of something that happened 6 months ago. We're going to be focusing in on an event that occurred on February 21st, 2023. Now, my role here is as a prosecutor, but I have no vote, nor have I attempted to influence a vote in any way. So I am here to facilitate the presentation of the story. I don't intend to, or I'm going to work really hard to not try to influence or interject anything into it as my personal beliefs, although I will still have to do my job as an attorney. Now, the investigation was initiated back on April 17th, 2023. The event, whatever it is, and you'll hear about it in just a minute, had been discussed with Mr. Vela and had been discussed with myself, Mr. Klein. Prior to that, council was given an opportunity to digest whether they wanted this to be an investigated matter. The reason that this went to a more formal investigation is not a suggestion of impropriety. It is a suggestion of trying to get the story without bias. Now just imagine, if you would, that Mr. Vela is my employer. He's one of 7. And so asking the city attorney to interject views or to investigate your employer, that seems to be somewhat of a fatal mission. So in an effort to try to get the independence and the clarity of what occurred, we asked an independent investigative team out of Denver, who came very, very highly recommended, to come down, interview witnesses, interview Mr. Vela, interview people that saw the event, and to help us with their findings. And that's what that investigative report that many of you have picked up, that's what it says. That is now a public record. So we have not tried to in any way defame anyone through that. That is a public record. Anyone that's watching online, I understand it's been downloaded to access online, or come to the city and you can be given a copy of it. The report was requested by myself, and I played no part in, other than giving background information as to who the participants were, names, addresses, and phone numbers, but I played no part in the authoring of the report. I did not author a single word. I did not suggest a single change. I can tell you that I was the contact point for the investigators, and no one at the city had access to the investigators except when they came down and viewed the scene. But there was no influence on the part of the city as to what the report would say or what the conclusions might be. Equally, there was a draft that was submitted. We didn't request it, but they sent it anyway. There was a draft that was sent, and I circulated that draft to Mr. Vela, his attorney, and to the council members a couple of weeks ago. As a result of that, the final report came out, and unless they changed a syntax word here or there or spelled my name correct, which they didn't do very often in the report, there is no change between the initial draft and the final draft. None was requested. I didn't make any request. It stands as it stands. I was not interviewed as part of the investigation because I didn't see anything of it. But as you read the report, you'll see that my name comes up a whole bunch because there were discussions about, for lack of a better word, settlement. There was a discussion of how maybe we resolve this matter without it going its full lifespan. Settlement negotiations, as Judge Manley would tell you, at least in my world of trial courts, is not admissible. It's a no-no to discuss it. So whatever went on, and there were discussions between Mr. Vela and his attorney and myself and the mayor, there were discussions with regard to ways to resolve this matter. The fact that those settlement negotiations were either successful or not successful really doesn't have anything to do with what we're dealing with tonight. I can tell you that even at the last minute, the meeting that Judge Manley and I and Mr. Horton had There were settlement discussions concerning the agenda and how to streamline the process. So in my world, in Mr. Horton's world, settlement is required, and it does not indicate either responsibility or lack of responsibility as to what the ultimate issue is. It's meant to be a streamlining event. So with that, I'm going to try to explain what this is all about, what the report says. I invite you as the public, and certainly I invite the council, as you consider your responsibilities here, to review the report as to what it says. What will eventually come of this is that the council will decide on their own what they want to do with this. I can tell you, as a matter of law, expulsion from the city council is not an alternative. It is not something that the city, in my view, could ask for, nor will we ask for it. And the reason for that is that our charter, which is in 1963, a bunch of lawyers got together and created a charter which in essence creates all the rules for how we operate in La Junta, and that's different than other towns. It does not make reference to an option of expulsion. So expulsion is not an alternative to the council. The council is going to be really faced with two questions: either dismissing the matter and calling it a day, or taking an action with regard to censure of Mr. Vela. But there won't be anything more than that. There should not be any expectation of that. So here's what happens. And I again invite you to read the report for a more detailed matter. There was a normal council meeting. Mayor Ayala has been trying to make this more of a community meeting than it has been in the past. I can tell you in all the years that I've been sitting here, we got Mayor Rizzuto back there in the back. He can tell you that there were many council meetings where we were all alone, talking to ourselves, that there wasn't a single citizen in the room. Mayor Ayala has been attempting to expand city interest and to show people what a great place this is, so he has been inviting various groups to come and basically get some free publicity out of it. We've had people from the high school plays, we've had picket wire people, we've had lots of different actions and opportunities, and this was one of them. On February 21st, there was a group of young ladies that was asked to come and promote what they were doing. That was somewhat of a dance routine. Those ladies, I think there was like 8 or 10 young teenage ladies, and then a couple of sponsors that were here. And they were going to promote their activities simply by standing next to the lectern there and giving everybody a little hey to as to what they were doing and why they were doing it. And that's what did occur. But prior to that, some of those participants needed to alter their dress wear. I'm led to believe, and the report will direct you to it, that there was several that had to put on costumes either over their dress, their streetwear, or substituting it. At some point, Mr. Vela approached the closed door where these ladies were in, knocked on the door, asked for a tissue, and his entry was pretty much blocked. One of the adults within the room then returned a tissue box to him by reopening the door, and then Mr. Vela exited from that area. That's what this is all about. There are issues of contention, and again, I invite you to read the report. Two witnesses say that Mr. Vela was back at the coffee machine that the officer is standing next to back in the back. And for those of you that were in the meeting earlier, you noticed that Mr. Vela did go up to the coffee machine. He does that pretty much all the time. We see it at least once a meeting. And the version that those witnesses say is that Mr. Vela left the coffee machine, went over into this room that's adjoining us, and initiated the contact. One of the witnesses says that when he knocked on the door, he gave it one of these. trying to look around to see what was going on. Mr. Vela denies that he saw anything, yet in another statement, he indicates that he knew that there was a little Hispanic gal that was wearing a tiara. So he saw something. Incidentally, that little Hispanic girl wearing the tiara was one of the gals that was getting costumed. So there's a differing view, and you're going to hear from Mr. Horton, that Mr. Vela claimed, and he did this in an open session, he claimed that he went from here around the corner to the office where he typically gets tissues, and that took 25 seconds, and that's all that occurred. The witnesses say completely different, and the witnesses say not only was he at the coffee machine, but there were napkins at the coffee machine to help him with his nasal issue, and he's literally about 5 yards from the men's restroom where there's more towels and toilet paper. So the council is going to be asked to believe whether Mr. Vela was there and then came all the way across to check things out, or whether he went around the corner. The investigator did not buy Mr. Vela's story. Categorically said it makes no sense. And according to the investigator, the witnesses, the adult witnesses inside the room, indicated that when they first opened the door, he was straining to see what was going on, and when they opened the door the second time, just large enough to pass out the box of Kleenex, that he was still gawking at what he could see on the inside. So that's a significant event that I'm going to ask you, the council, to consider. But there's some other things that are really troubling in both the report and in Mr. Vela's statements about this issue after this thing started to play out. One of the things that Mr. Vela said in response to a discussion in open session, that's like right here, in open session, is he challenged that one of the other council members, as a law enforcement officer, surely noticed that girls' skirts are getting shorter and girls' necklines are getting more revealing, and that's just the mode of the day, and that it is not necessarily improper behavior to take note of that. Now, he may deny that. It is, I have a verbatim transcript of that council meeting where that came out. Interestingly, the investigators, in looking at the statements that he made in those minutes and the statements that he made to them and the statements that occurred, they didn't buy into that. They thought that that was absolutely not credible, made no sense. But two of the witnesses said that when Mr. Vela opened that, the door was opened, he strained to look over to see what was shaking. Now, whether he had an interest in seeing young ladies in different stages of dress or not, no one will ever know. So from my point of view as a legal analysis is that we can never prove intent. There's only one person in the whole world that knows intent, and that will be Mr. Vela. And Mr. Vela will say, hey, all I wanted was a Kleenex. And then you're going to have to judge whether that was valid or not, and then he had other opportunities. Part of the concern of the investigator was that as he asked for the Kleenexes and saw that he wasn't welcome, that didn't deter him from waiting for the Kleenexes instead of hightailing it out of the area, as the first action being a warning shot that there was something going on. The investigators found that to be extremely troublesome. Mr. Vela is concerned that the two adults that were in that room didn't sign, as a matter of a signature, did not sign their complaints. And I will tell you that in my view, and Mr. Manley can rule on it if we need to, that has no significance whatsoever in whether they made those statements about what occurred. Incidentally, as they were interviewed by the investigators, those statements stood up as to what they wrote and said and gave to Mr. Klein, and what they said to the investigator. So if you hear that the initial statements by the two adults are suspect, I would applaud Mr. Manley if he would rule on that. There have been suggestions made of ways to avoid this hearing tonight. And those suggestions, call it settlement, were offered. And in the report, you're going to see that I'm painted as a bad guy because I told Mr. Vela apparently that I would call him, and then I left and went to Florida. That's probably true. But all of the settlement negotiations were initiated by yours truly. As late as 3 or 4 business days ago. Now, I just got through telling you that that doesn't mean anything, but because this report keeps mentioning it over and over again, I want you to be aware that factually, I was more interested in seeing this thing settled than other individuals. The state of Colorado, in the Constitution, the state of Colorado in its statutes, the city of La Junta in its charter, and the city of La Junta in its municipal code all talk about restoring the public trust, that's you guys, and people on Facebook, and the council, in what goes on with city government. So at least there was enough concern as to whether the conduct was concerning, I don't know if that's a correct usage of that word, to the general public, that it needs to be looked at. But again, that's what prompted City Council to decide things. The investigators said in several different places that they thought that all of the complaints that were made by these two mothers were credible, and that Mr. Vela's defenses were not. So what can you expect for the rest of the evening? What you can expect is that I'm going to shut up, which will come as good news to most people. Mr. Horton and on behalf of Mr. Vela will have an opportunity to tell you some things that he wants to tell you, being the council and for you as citizens to hear. He may actually ask for Mr. Vela to facilitate a demonstration of what Mr. Vela thought would occur. We'll see if that takes place. And he may ask council to get up out of their seats and go watch what occurred around the corner when this whole event took place. At some point, I will summarize what I think may need summary. It'll be short. Mr. Horton will summarize what he thinks needs to be summarized. It will be short. We will adjourn this hearing, and then we'll see what happens next. So, Judge Manley, I hope I bored everyone to tears.
I would note for the record that, like all council meetings and proceedings are being recorded, that's available. The city clerk has a copy of the report and the citation, basically the same documents that have gone to all the council members, so there is a record of those as part of the city records here.
Judge Manley, can you speak closer to the mic? It's difficult, I'm sure, for folks in the back to hear you.
Fortunately, it works better than the one at the courthouse. There's been issues down there. In terms of our presentation, I don't know, Mr. Horton, do you want to do a summary, or Mr. Mallory, you have other information to present, or just the documentation that's been submitted? I don't know, Mr. Mallory, I'm not sure if we're looking at each party to present information, or just, but that's pretty much the presentation in the document.
That's a presentation, other than everyone has a copy of the final report.
Okay. Mr. Horton, on behalf of Mr. Vela.
Thank you, everyone, for your time this evening. As Attorney Maloff stated earlier, this is a very sensitive and serious situation, and the parties involved do take it seriously because it is a matter of community concern, and it is with that I submit Council, we are here today with the task of deciding whether or not the actions of your fellow city council member, Edward Vela, rises to a level that he should be censured from his public duty, and that if you find the evidence shows he is unable to perform in that capacity, you will be faced with a decision on what to do. I will say that this event did take place on February 21st, and the evidence will show that there was no notice that the dancers would be on the premises. The evidence will show that the police was not called. The evidence will show that there was no injury that occurred. The evidence will also show that there has not been an adjudication on the facts of this case in regards to any law. It will also show that Mr. Vela isn't being charged with misuse of public resources. The evidence will also show that there has been no violation of law. But before I get into the presentation of the case on behalf of Mr. Vela, I would like to implore the city council members, as well as the mayor, to accompany me as we go to the scene of dispute for a reenactment of what took place from the perspective of Mr. Vela on February 21st. Can you all do that with me, please? Thank you.
We're going to ask members of the audience to stay here just because it gets too crowded otherwise. Like any time when you're asking charges of fact to do a view of a scene, they're not to discuss matters while they're out there other than just to be told what they're being shown. The doors are going to be open, so depending where you're sitting, you may be able to see what, in part at least, what's happening here.
Now, I want you to take note of how long it takes you to walk over to the secretary's office or the city manager. This is a scene of what I'm going to do now is explain the role. Based on the words in the investigative report stated by one Amy Salazar in regards to what takes place. So right now, we're going to do the reenactment. Mr. Vela, are you ready?
I'm ready.
You can't come in here. There are girls changing.
All I need is a tissue.
He says he needs a tissue. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the event that took place on February 21st that is in question tonight. As I stated previously, notice how long it took for you to walk over here. Notice how long the interaction lasted. Recognize the words that were stated that are synonymous with what was included in the report. Notice the tissue box that was handed, which is the same size that was pictured in the investigative report. May we proceed? Thank you all for accompanying me and Mr. Vela in that reenactment of February 21st event. It surely is appreciated.
I would note for our proceedings that the council members and mayor are all now back into the council chambers. It'll be up to everybody to decide what to do with that. The challenge, my role would be to decide whether certain information is relevant or not, basically so we're not wasting time on things that are sidetracks or character issues or politics or personalities. But otherwise, in the report, there's some challenges to some of the items. That's a different question. That'll be up to the council members of how much weight to give certain items. Do they think it's important or not in making their decision? Or do they believe some, all, or none of what the witness had to present? That'll be up to the council members, not up to the Honorable. So, Mr. Orton, if I go ahead.
Thank you, Honorable Hearing Officer. So what just took place lies at the crux of why we're here. The doorknob. As you all witnessed, the door does lock when it is shut. The next thing, there was a knock. And you've read the report, if you're familiar with it, you will see that some of the things that I'm stating is also in the report. So there was a knock and the door opened. Now, based on the complaint received by Amy Salazar, it's reported that the door was not open very widely, which makes sense because as the caretaker, knowing that there are children, girls getting dressed in the room, you would not want to open the door in such a fashion that it would create enough room, space, and opportunity for anyone who should not be viewing the contents of the room to do so. So I first submit that the door was only opened yay far. And as you all witnessed, by accompanying me to the reenactment scene, there's not much you can see as you're peering in from the position of Mr. Vela. That brings me to the statements. You cannot come in here, the girls are dressing. That notice was given to Mr. Vela, to which he responded, I just need a tissue. The door closes, and there is a statement made on the inside of the door to the effect, restating Mr. Vela's question, he needs a tissue. He says he needs a tissue. Now, this statement is important because it shows contemplation. It shows that you in fact know that there is someone on the other side of the door who is not in fact a dancer. It shows that not only do you know that there's someone on the other side of the door, but you close it and contemplate whether or not to provide the request of the tissue. So with that contemplation, the next step is that the door reopens. Now, if you all have the complaint in front of you from Ms. Amy Salazar, there are a few comments that I would like to address. It says here that I closed the door ASAP. Again, how much time transpired that Mr. Vela would be allowed to view girls changing? Because remember, as caretakers, you don't want to put them in a situation where they will be violated, whether physically or visibly. And so she closed the door ASAP, as a good caretaker would. And after grabbing the tissue, she says, I opened the door as little as possible and passed the tissue as fast as I could. And I saw that he did not make any attempt to avert his eyes, while closing the door fast and handing him the tissue as fast as she could. In fact, she states, I was surprised that he still wanted the tissue after I made it clear that the girls were changing. I thought his behavior was odd and did not appreciate the fact that he still attempted to look in after he was aware that the girls were dressing. In the limited view that she states she opened the door, all of this transpired based on her account. I do not feel that this is normal or acceptable behavior from a grown man, let alone a man on our city council. The report shows that there was no sign on the door stating that in this public building where public business is conducted, to give anyone warning that underage or overage young women were in fact changing. Further, the question comes back to the contemplation. If the feelings were felt in such a manner as described in the complaint, why the door reopened and the tissue given? Especially if there is an inkling that someone is taking a look at something that they should not. Now, we've heard that Mr. Vela could have gone to the bathroom. We heard that Mr. Vela could have done other things in order to accomplish the task of grabbing a tissue for his runny nose. Well, I submit before you today that there could have been notice provided in order to protect these young girls. For instance, the agenda of the February 21st City Council meeting, and I understand the evidence rules are relaxed, but public document, it does not state that the dancers are on the agenda, which means this agenda that is sent out before every single council meeting advising those participating, whether citizens or council members, of what's going to take place, there was no notice that these dancers would be here. So the first thing that could have been done is there could have been provided notice. Oh, this is much different than a regular city council meeting. We have other individuals who are going to be there. Okay, I get it. Got it. That wasn't done. Nor on the minutes of the February 21st meeting did it show these dancers participated in the 5-minute time frame that the public is able to come in and comment, as you saw and witnessed earlier. But there's also something else that could have been done. There could have been a sign posted on the door advising those who are present in a public building paid by public citizens, their taxpayer dollars. This is not a private building. This is not a building or a property that goes by the same rules as if you were in your home. Another thing could have been done. The dancers could have changed before they got here. The dancers could have used the utility room. The dancers could have used the girls' restroom. Having them change in the secretary's office next to the city manager created the situation that you have today. Because despite the multiple opportunities for notice, there was none given. But I'll move on. Now, I am a lawyer, so there are some rules that I had to research and look up for this, right? And so what we find out at the crux of the legal rules cited in the notice to show cause, which you all should have received, is section 31.4.307, as well as 31.4.108. But we will disregard 108. Or which one? There is, yes. We're disregarding 31-4-108. So I withdraw that. But what we find here is that the Colorado Constitution, specifically in Article 29, entitled Ethics in Government, which is on page 12 of the Sersha Report, or the Sersha Guidance, purpose and findings. It states the people of the state of Colorado hereby find and declare the conduct of public officers, members of the General Assembly, local government officials, and government employees must hold the respect and confidence of the people. They shall carry out their duties for the benefit of the people of the state. They shall therefore avoid conduct that is in violation of their public trust or that creates a justifiable impression among members of the public that such trust is being violated. Any effort to realize financial gain through public office other than compensation provided by law is a violation of that trust. And to ensure propriety and preserve public confidence, they must have the benefit of specific standards to guide their conduct, of a penalty mechanism to enforce those standards. Now that is the Constitution of this beautiful state of Colorado. Now why am I mentioning this? It's because the electorate got together with the consent of the people to have this amendment. And what followed from that are the ethical guidelines that's mentioned in 31-4-307, as well as the Sersha Guidelines, Chapter 6, which you all should be familiar with because it was in the discovery packet. And it is the same guidelines by which this investigation, this public hearing, and any decision to come thereafter was based on. So if there was a roadmap to show what was to take place from beginning to end, it's this Chapter 6, Ethical Conduct in Government, which was cited during the City Council meeting where the complaint was first read, as well as handed in the discovery packet and cited by the investigator in her report, giving full credence to the truth of this document, that it was being used to guide this process. So, earlier there was mentioned information about the complaint. And thank you, Honorable Hearing Officer, for not ruling on that. But I will jump right in. So, the Chapter 6, Ethical Conduct in Local Government, provides several frameworks on how local governments ought to handle ethical investigations. As you heard from the city attorney earlier, LaHun is known as a local rule or a home rule jurisdiction. So basically, that's a fancy way for people who live in Denver to say, y'all can do what y'all want down there. Just make sure you got something and it's written down. So, based on this Chapter 6, it says the initiation of the process to enforce an ethical standard should require a written complaint or allegation of unethical conduct. The form of the written complaint is important. The person charged with the unethical conduct has a right to know what conduct is alleged to have violated the ethical rules. Here, that is the February 21st event, which was first written by Amy Salazar and sent to the city manager's secretary on April 13th. It was about a month and a half, at least, in time difference between the event and the complaint. Now, it says here, at a minimum, the complaint should include a detailed description of the action alleged to have violated the rules. And if you've all taken a look at the complaint, there's no allegation that a specific rule was violated. Why? Because it says not only should the complaint include a detailed description. Now again, I'm only reading this because it was submitted as the guideline for the city council to follow. Not only a detailed description of the action alleged to have violated the rules and citation to the ethical rules alleged to be violated by such conduct. These contents were not on the complaint from Amy Salazar or Sarah Mahoney describing the events at the Kiva. Requiring the complaining party to verify or certify under penalty of perjury or other sanction that the allegations are truthful may aid in preventing complaints that are merely intended to harass or which might be politically motivated. That is from Chapter 6 of the CERSHA guidelines that I did not write, but was submitted as a guidance to follow. Once received, the complaint must be formally delivered and served upon the person alleged to have violated the rules. Now, moving down to the initial review, because the next session talks about the hearing body or officer. We know that the hearing body and officers is the people you see before you today, you all. So the initial review. And I know I'm going slow, but I have to drill this in because there are so many facets of this case that are important that it requires it. I apologize about the mic.
Turn the gain down.
The handheld?
Step back a little. Move it up.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Or can you hear me without it? All right, let's do it. So, I need the mic?
Yeah.
All right.
You just don't need to be so close to it.
We have to make sure it's getting into the recording system.
Foot away.
Right there.
Move the mic.
All right. Good to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know. All right. So, initial review. This is after you've received the complaint and have addressed the hearing body regarding the contents of that complaint. A preliminary or initial review of the complaint may be a beneficial step. A complaint may fail to assert any actions by the public servant that constitute an ethical misstep, or may assert actions that are unrelated to the servant's public duties. Again, I submit, we are discussing Mr. Vela getting out of his seat, walking to the secretary's office, asking for tissue, and being given tissue, and then coming back to his seat. And on April 13th, a letter was received describing the events. At a preliminary review, the hearing body or officer can elect to dismiss the complaint. That did not happen here, clearly, thereby saving the local government time and money in processing spurious allegations. Any decision to dismiss the complaint should be made in writing and provided to the complaining party and the person against whom the allegations were raised. All right. When it comes to the decision and the penalty before the council tonight, it's important to remember just what we are evaluating here. As we stated earlier, this is a sensitive issue, and it has caused much emotion in the community on all sides. And so it is important that we remember the CERSHA guidelines, that we remember the reenactment as well as the complaints. And it is important to remember that when it comes to CERSHA, they recommend a few things in terms of ethical violations with public officers. And what those are include the intentional disclosure of confidential government information, right, for the Edward Snowdens out there, the acceptance of gifts of substantial value, I guess that's the Clarence Thomases of the world, the misuse of public resources or public equipment, right, stealing, embezzlement, I'm going to take this one home, no one will know, and engaging in contractual relationships for the personal benefit of the public official and or the official's relatives, or any business in which the official has an interest. And there must be rules that clearly inform, based on censure, it states, and have rules that clearly inform constituents of what is expected of their local representatives. My initial research into that from La Junta has shown up empty. However, I will leave it to the city attorney to correct me if I'm wrong. So, we've reviewed the search and complaint guidelines, we've reviewed the initial review, and we've reviewed some of the decision and penalty in regards to the decision City Council has to make tonight. Now, when it comes to the statute cited here in the notice to show cause 314307, we are not discussing that. So what I will say is this. The beautiful thing that I love about La Junta is that it is so small that if we have an issue with one another, we can go and approach each other with those issues. We don't have to run to the media to help us out. I don't have to go find Benjamin Crump to help me out. I can approach my neighbor and talk about the cats. I can talk about the garbage in the street. I can talk about the vandalism. I can consult my neighbor when they've had their home broken into. We have the ability to approach each other because that is the atmosphere that La Junta has created. That is the atmosphere of which why I chose to be here, and it is the atmosphere as to which Mr. Vela volunteered so many community hours and has decided to inject himself in front of the people, which creates an opportunity to be scorned, to be yelled at, all for the betterment of the community, which is coming together even though you may disagree, even though you may not like Mr. Vela. God, Mr. Vela got another thing to say, right? You may even hate him. But does his actions rise to the level of the unethical conduct that Saoirse has provided in their guidelines? Does the conduct rise to the level of which the framers of the Constitution and the people of this great state created the 29th Amendment for? Because, believe it or not, the decision that you make today will set a precedent either way. A precedent by which all of you will have to hold yourselves to. And maybe we can ask the city attorney to help us out, but us lawyers, we live off of precedents. Because it shows to us this is what the body of those who were provided the authority decided to do. And we have to measure these things for future actions so that we have a better opportunity to determine what is unethical, what is ethical, and what may be offensive, what may be on the line, what may be not a crime. You all have the ability to decide that, because that is the community that La Junta is. And that is the community Mr. Vela chose to serve. And so I implore you that as you make this decision, that you think about the rules, you think about the facts, about 25 seconds. Girls protected because the door was barely cracked. Girls protected because the ones at the door shut the door so fast that it prevented anyone from committing any egregious acts. And before I sit down, there were a couple of things stated. Concerning intent, it was described to you earlier that no one would ever know the intent except for Mr. Vela. And so I ask you, before you make the worst possible decision, is it okay to determine intent where there are no facts that speak to that intent? Where no one would ever know except that person? Is that enough to charge someone with the crime? Is that enough to convict someone of a crime? Reasonable doubt is the standard that I was told this will be judged by. The police weren't called. There was no injury. There was no embezzlement. There was no conviction or adjudication. Therefore, there should be no charge. Mr. Vela, did I forget anything else?
Yeah, I just want to give folks a little background on my life experiences.
Objection to all this?
Yeah, we're strictly dealing with the one allegation, which extends a little bit over time, and therefore there, but not the rest of the background information. Otherwise, we're going to stray off into all sorts of other areas that don't help decide yes or no what did or didn't happen or what should be done about it.
Yes, so his comments are directly speaking to the relevance of trustworthiness and character that has been invoked into this by the very nature of the charge.
That wasn't how Mr. Vela was starting out with saying what he wanted to discuss.
Mr. Vela, could you rephrase?
Pardon?
Could you rephrase to show that you are talking about your character for trustworthiness as the unethical charge?
Continuing objection. Here's what they're trying to do, and I respect that Mr. Vela has a list of things that he would like everybody to know. He's a veteran, he worked for Fort Lyon, he worked for this, he worked for that. What this issue of credibility is not governed by rules of civil or criminal procedure. To allow this does nothing other than prolong these proceedings, which I think have gone on way too long. They have mischaracterized the law, they have mischaracterized the facts, and now we seek to wash that away by saying what a wonderful man he is because he's a veteran. I'm a veteran. Didn't say I'm a wonderful man. Point is that in this limited administrative proceeding, he's not entitled to all of the protections that are allowed in a criminal or civil case.
Your Honor, hearing officer, I would like to disagree. First, Supreme Court ruling in the United States provide that hearing procedures under the Goldberg decision, there are 10 things that the due process clause applied to the Colorado state through the 14th Amendment. It's due process clause. It's timely and adequate notice, oral presentation of evidence, oral presentation of arguments, confronting any adverse witnesses, cross-examining those adverse witnesses, disclosure of opposing evidence, which includes Mr. Vela's right, decision on the record of the hearing, right to retain counsel, statement of reasons for decision and discussing of evidence relied upon, and impartial decision maker. Now that is considered the maximum procedures under the Goldberg Supreme Court ruling in regards to administrative proceedings. They then go over the minimum procedures, which is notice, statement of reasons, opportunity to respond, and impartial decision making. So even under the minimum procedures here, it would be a violation of my client's due process rights to not have him speak towards evidence that doesn't mischaracterize what took place, but speaks to the ethical behavior, which is character evidence brought forth not by us, but by the very submission of the charges against him. And so it is for those reasons I request that the Honorable Hearing Officer allow him to speak for 3 minutes what is on his paper. That is not political, but mainly speaking towards his character for holding trust and respect in the community and for the office in which he is currently serving as a public official.
I'll withdraw the objection. 3 minutes.
You have 3 minutes, Mr. Vela.
Thank you, Council, for that opportunity to address you all personally. I stand before you as a city councilman and representative of Ward 3 today. And as a citizen and council person, I am deeply committed to liberty, democracy, and justice. First, in my 8 years of service as a city councilman, I have only missed about 5 city council meetings, attended countless out-of-town seminars and events on behalf of the city, and even attempted to attend various budget and committee meetings for which I was denied by the administration. My service in the positions I've had in my career, I strongly believe in good government with good employees, and like President Reagan has said, I trust you, but I still need to verify you. I have always tried to be a great model in my adult career. I enlisted in the Army right out of high school and ended up in Vietnam. Yes, I even dealt with a negative blowback from serving in Vietnam. And initially, in the beginning, some of this reminded me of that. I dealt with PTSD, and because of the VA, I mainly got cured of PTSD. Early on, I learned that I had certain temperaments to improve. To do so, I engaged myself in the community early on. For example, coaching Little League baseball teams, youth basketball and bowling leagues, and so forth. I am proud that these youngsters, now men and women, today approach me to share memories and thank me for the experience and lessons learned under my guidance. My religious faith, the VA therapist in the Fort Lyon VA Medical Center, OJC staff, and my highly respected World War II veterans and Korean veterans helped me get back to where I am today. I also realize that self-reflection, that getting involved builds character and renews our faith in ourselves and in our great country. Second, I believe the power of democracy in the Republic of the USA, the city's populace, the city council, and the city administration must have mutual trust. It must be had to have a great city that is financially secure and its citizens secure with their pocketbooks. Many along my life's journey And I wanted to tell you, when I got done with the VA, I went to work for NIBCO, and in 8 years I was running the place. Following my job at NIBCO, because they left town, I went to work for the railroad.
That's the 3 minutes.
Got laid off there, and then I went to work for the VA as a patient representative for 20 years. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you very much for allowing him to share that. So with that said, Mr. Vela has about 3 more sessions left before he is officially retired. He is not signed up for re-election. And truth be told, let's see what November brings in terms of the community's perception of him.
Sure.
Thank you.
I want to make sure that the record is accurate here. I don't know if other members of the public on the packet they received outside was complete or not. Mine was not. I realized it had only the odd number of pages. Now I have a complete one that I've been given as part of the hearing here, and looking at the people sitting around me, I believe they have complete ones with odd and even number of pages, both, but I want to make sure, at least for the council members, that they do have a complete version of the report that was prepared by investigating law group, which should be 16 pages plus some attachments.
If they got the one in, and they should have, they actually should have 2 copies, one 2 weeks ago and one now. If they look at the copy that's in that manila envelope that Councilwoman Pantoja has pulled out, that's a complete version. Now, there were other versions that may be circulated tonight. I can't speak to the completeness of those.
Well, I just don't want members of the public looking at it and confused either and saying, well, where is this that everybody's talking about when there are not pages there? It might have only been my copy that was mixed up. Second, Mr. Warden, you referred to some things that were in the discovery packet. I need to find out, is that something that went to all the council members that they have to review?
Negative.
Or is that something between judges?
Negative.
So that is not, other than to the extent that it was quoted or read from here, it's not something that council members otherwise have as part of their documents review.
To be specific, the things that I referred to were the complaint letters and the minutes, which the February minutes are in. Oh, that's in the discovery packet. So I say the SERSHA guidelines they've seen. It was quoted in the investigative report. The complaint they've seen. And as far as the statutory rulings, I don't have copies of those, but much of it's in the notice for hearing here, as well as in the investigative report cited by the investigator.
The SERSA guidelines, we would know, stand for Colorado Intergovernmental Risk Sharing Agency, which is a...
That was circulated.
Okay, that was circulated, all right. But has it been adopted?
No.
By resolution or ordinance by the city?
No. Don't ruin my rebuttal here.
I'm just trying to make sure we're clear on everything here. My knowledge is SERSA, we buy our insurance for our community service workers. There are many municipalities in Colorado joined together with this agency to have an insurance pool. I think that would cover the things I referred to, because I think we need to make sure we're clear what items that council members do or don't have to refer to.
My turn?
Your turn.
Okay. I'm going to ask you, council members, to think about 2 words, and it'll decide everything for you. Simplicity and empathy. Where do we hear in all the meetings that have happened since then, where do we hear Mr. Vela saying, gee, I can appreciate maybe those underage girls got embarrassed? Did we hear that? No. Did we hear, hey, I'm sorry for what I did. Maybe it looks bad even though I didn't intend it. Did we hear that? No. Hey, I went 25 seconds around the corner, but everybody else says I left the copy machine. The point is that Mr. Vela wants to blame everybody else for what he did. City manager should have posted a notice. The city clerk should have put something on the agenda. We should have had notice, so I wouldn't screw up. Where does it say in Mr. Vela's remarks, I screwed up? Okay, I'm going to look at it from the girls' side as underage young ladies who I recognize were wearing one of them wearing a tiara and one of very small Hispanic. We know he saw something inside. What did he see? Well, I don't know, but what about the girls? Are we really focusing so much on Mr. Vela that we miss the bullseye? The bullseye is his conduct was unacceptable by anyone's standards. Just ask yourselves, if you were a teenager and some guy, some dude, poked his head in and he admitted that he saw things in there. Let's not lose sight of that. He wasn't going blindly into it. He's admitted that. He's tried to justify his actions by saying, Mr. State Patrolman, you saw short skirts and V-necked blouses. Trying to legitimatize what he did. Now, the simple thing that I think you have to understand here, and I'd like to hear your vote, will be whether his conduct instills trust in 6 or 7 or 8 teenagers and their parents, or whether it just stinks. Now, Mr. Horton, and I respect him. He's a good and competent lawyer, and I'm going to tell you I'm very impressed with his argument. Very heartfelt, and I'm sure that he means what he said. But the City of Lahaina never adopted the SIRSA guidelines. The SIRSA guidelines are not anything of a requirement on any of its insured cities. It's a publication. Now, it was submitted in a discovery request because I gave Mr. Horton everything I could think of that pertained to this matter. Gave him some shots of some texts and some pictures and some this and some that. But the guidelines aren't part of the law here. He makes a big deal of, well, the police weren't called. There's no criminal matter. He cites case law. He makes arguments that there was no crime reported. This isn't about a crime. This is about conduct. This is about something that is over and above and unusual. If this was a jury, we'd be saying to the jury, just put yourself in those little girls' shoes and tell me how you come out. And that's exactly what I'm saying to you. We don't have to look at whether the SIRSA requirements about what should be in a complaint are met. They're not binding on Lahaina. All right, there's something for them to talk about. Thank you for talking about it, but it means nothing. All of the things, all of the arguments, all of the spurious comments are meant to deflect from the ultimate simple issue. Did he peek in there and wouldn't common sense tell you to turn around and get the heck out of there rather than being left an opportunity to be criticized for what goes on? Now, he's brought it all on himself. We have not heard Mr. Vela say, I did it. I'm sorry that they took it that way. I didn't intend it. Boy, did I learn something. Confession being good for the soul. I haven't heard that. But I sure think that that's what this is all about. His bad judgment, whatever it is that the message that you want 16 and 17-year-old teenage girls understanding that their council members can do? Is peek during a council meeting, peek into a door to see them in some state of undress. Doggone it, Mr. Vela, you didn't have to find out what was going on in that room, and you had plenty of other places to get your Kleenex. So doggone it, Mr. Vela, we know what went on. You wanted to know what was going in that room, and you wanted to know now. So you took it upon yourself to come up with a lame excuse that you wanted a Kleenex. Well, by God, I hope that you got...
Hearing officer, I'm sorry to object, but I would like the city attorney to keep his comments directed generally towards the case and not my client.
Well, it's Mr. Vela's case, Mr. Horton. In any event, simplicity and empathy, maybe add in a little bit of remorse, maybe get away from all of the procedural things that Mr. Horton suggested, and just deal with common sense. Did Mr. Vela go over the line? Thank you.
Does this conclude all the information for everybody then?
For the city, it does.
Just trying to think.
I don't believe I have a rebuttal based on the rules.
Not normal.
I do.
No. You've got an attorney, and we've already outlined what our procedure is going to be tonight.
Can I speak?
No. Not at this part. Now, I don't know what city council wants to do next. I think at this point I'm going to turn it back to the mayor and see what, if anything, council wants to do. That's up to their decision if they have any motions or discussion on it.
I'm sorry? Oh, no, we're done. Thank you.
You want to take that with you?
You're fired.
Just open it back up, Dean.
I'm sorry?
Just open it
Yes,
back up.
call the roll.
Council meeting?
Yes, call the roll.
So once I open this back up, I'm running the meeting. I can't make motions or second motions, correct?
You are correct.
Okay, just so everyone knows. I'm going to call this meeting of the Honda City Council back to order on September 5th, 2023. Mrs. Schofield, please do roll call one more time.
Ramirez,
Present.
Velasquez,
Present.
Ayala,
Here.
Ochoa. Here. Vela,
Here.
Montoya.
Here. Do I have a motion?
A motion as to the consideration of the outcome of what we just heard. I would make a motion that we censure Mr. Vela as a result of the findings of the executive summary report and based on the complaint in his letters.
Can't hear you, Paul.
I would make a motion that we censure Mr. Vela based on the executive summary report. It's now public record. And as part of that censure, have Mr. Vela cease any representation of himself as a city council member for the remainder of this term.
Motion's out of order, Mr. Mayor. We cannot expel him, and if we can't expel him, we cannot limit his duties as a duly elected council member. The motion's out of order.
Then I'll amend my motion that we just censure Mr. Vela.
Can you just reword it, just so we have it clear?
That I make a motion that we censure Mr. Vela according to what we've heard tonight and to the executive summary report that's been provided as now part of the open record.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Did.
I second that motion.
I have a motion and I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none,
Can we have an explanation what that censure includes so
Yes.
everybody knows?
Mr. Maloff.
A censure is a statement by the issuing body, in this case the council, that they do not approve of the actions and that the recipient of the censure should be warned that his actions are unacceptable. That's a legal significance. That's a practical significance. I mean, the public hears about it. They can construe whatever they want to out of it. But from a legal point of view, he's told that was a no-no, Mr. Vela, if the motion passed. That's a no-no, Mr. Vela. You're put on notice.
Any other discussion?
I guess as an explanation to how I came to that, or the conclusion of where I made the motion for censure, I keep thinking of three words: responsibility, accountability, and ownership. Those are the three things where public trust lives in everything that we do. We have the responsibility as a city council to be accountable. And part of being accountable is accepting ownership. And again, that's where I say that that's where the public confidence, not only in this body, but in every body that's been elected, whether it's a school board, whether it's from the top down, from the highest elected offices to the Ohio City Council, that's where the public trust lives. And we can only work on rebuilding that. So that's how I determined and made my decision for this. So thank you for the opportunity to offer discussion.
All right. Any more discussion?
Whatever happened to shop local everything, Dean? Why did you have to go to Denver for a company that has nothing but CU grads, of which you're an alumnus? And what was your censure when you got in trouble?
No, we're not talking about anything else.
I'm not talking to you,
Well,
Joe.
I'm telling you that's out of order. We're not talking about
I'll
that.
be glad to answer it. I'll be glad to answer it. I bought ownership in a mistake that I made. I admitted it to the people that I needed to admit it to. I bought ownership. I said I screwed up, I admit it, and I'll take whatever you knock me at. And that's what happened there. In terms of trying to get you a fair shake, Mr. Vela, we wanted to go as far away as we could so that the investigator would not be biased by all the things that you suggested, like this was a scheme because you were anti-tax or people don't like you. We just wanted to get the facts, and that's what we did. Thank you.
But your censure was purely ceremonial, right?
Just like yours is.
There's not going to be anything. You're just going to say that I have been censured. That doesn't prevent me from participating in the council.
I've already said that.
Censure is just a ceremonial thing, but at the same time, there was Paul's talking like when that door was open. Hello, who's there? No way. You saw how big a door opened. How can you say that? And the little girl that I saw with the crown and the little red top, I saw her crown, her face, and her left shoulder.
So
and that, I'm not done. Then you can take over.
You're never done, Mr. Vela, but I'm going to tell you that when you in your statement suggest that you expect them to apologize to you, somebody isn't thinking correctly. Do you deny that you said that? You wanted an apology from them for besmirching you. Come on, Mr. Vela. Come on.
You know what you wanted from me? You wanted me not to run for office. You wanted me to shut up. You wanted me to take a sick leave for the rest of my term. This was early on, and you said that came from the mayor.
This is really out of order, but I offered a whole variety of different choices to keep us from coming to this. And you, the only thing you got back was you wanted them to apologize.
Point of order.
Call for question.
I'm never going to admit to something, even if it appeases some people. If I had clear intent, I would do it. But when I left the podium here, I went straight
Mr.
back
Vela.
Point of order. And I went
Mr. Vela.
to take care. I'm not done.
You're done.
You can't call point of order. Dean, tell them you can't call point of order when somebody's discussing.
He can call a point of order.
No,
and he can turn
not
the
during the
microphone off if
discussion.
you
I
want
hadn't even
it.
finished my
There's a
conversation.
motion. There is now a motion on the floor, which is superior to yours, that says cutting off discussion. That needs to be decided. The council can vote on that.
As a result of my military experience, I developed these things, and they went through my nose. That's all I was interested in. I was never in the back, period, for coffee. I always come in first, get my coffee, and that's it. I know I did on that particular day.
Mr. Vela, you are done. We can't have any audience participation. I'm sorry. So I'm going to ask for the vote.
Mr. Vela cannot
That
vote.
passes 5-1.
He cannot vote. He must abstain.
That passes 5-0 with one abstention. With that said, I will now adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for coming out tonight.
Who do you want, Mary?
Lady in the beige shirt.
Mary. Where is she?
No, that's Mary was yours.
Oh. Which one? Carly.
For Lahana City Council and the people of Southeast Colorado, with your Southeast Colorado news, I'm Adrian Hart.